Hey guys, it's David Feiner from vibratinglove.com, and today we're doing a special webinar. It's called The Truth About Male Enhancement, and I have a very special guest with me today. His name is AJ, and as far as I care, is the biggest expert that you can find about male enhancement. So AJ, why won't you tell us about yourself a little bit?
Thank you very much. I'm very humbled that you see me that way. Uh, like you said, my name is AJ. I've been involved in the male enhancement field going on about 20 years. I kind of got involved in it by accident almost. I was researching some details on how to publish a bodybuilding book. And I was reviewing a lot of the media at the time, a lot of the newspapers, and a lot of the advertisements they had in some of those magazines dealt with penis pumps, penis surgeries, and because the theme of my bodybuilding manual at the time was for natural training, I thought it would be a good idea to try to find a natural, non-invasive alternative to the pumps and surgeries and things like that. So I started doing a lot of research, used some of my basic knowledge on kinesiology and soft tissue stretching and things of that nature. And there was already some knowledge before on the internet, but it was really hard to find. Put together a routine, made some decent gains. And what was interesting is when I set up the male enhancement portion of the bodybuilding program, and I started promoting it. For every 10 questions I get about the bodybuilding, maybe 9 of them, referring to that book, about 9 of them had to do with male enhancement. So, that told me that there was a very, very big need for this kind of information out there. So I started studying it as much as I could. And it's already a small community online about that, which has grown so much in that time. But so I transitioned to the message boards, started making myself known through there, in not only distributing information but also in attempting to assist the members. And I've participated in a few websites and publications dealing with male enhancement. We have a few more coming out, which I hope they're going to be really good and really help to change the face of male enhancement. And there's been a lot of development since then. Some of the things that we didn't have to deal with before, things like porn addiction that really weren't that big a focus 20 years ago. Now we're starting to see more attention being paid to that. A lot of men are becoming more, I guess, open in looking at male enhancement more as a method of just making overall improvements as opposed to just focusing on, say, one thing like penis enlargement.
Yeah,
So
that's exactly what most people think, like male enhancement equals penis enlargement. And I
yes,
was thinking that way for many years until I met you.
I appreciate that.
So maybe you will share with
And
us a little bit about like the broader perspective. What is inside male enhancement?
in my opinion, male enhancement encompasses subjects specific to men, usually in the realm of sexuality, but not always. The most popular when I started was penis enlargement, but there's also the facets of stamina, sexual stamina. And the thing about sexual stamina is that it's very fundamental to all the male enhancement. I mean, we on the message boards we've come up with acronyms, and one of the popular acronyms is EQ, and that stands for erection quality. That's a combined measure of stamina and hardness. And we found that you have to have those two things in abundance if you want to make gains. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about size gains, gains with just endurance. EQ is fundamental. So I mean that should be the priority. You want high erection quality. Now, in addition to the physical training that's involved with it, there's a very very profound mental and emotional component to it that is something that a lot of men don't talk about. I mean, they're starting to open up a lot more in the message board, but it's something that a lot of men don't talk about. It has to do with, the fears that they have, fears of inadequacy, performance anxiety, and some of them are very deep-rooted. And in all honesty, I mean, those types of issues really should be taken care of before you decide on getting to, a full male enhancement routine. There's a kind of a hierarchy of things. So, I mean, and when you come into this kind of training, it's really important that you use a mature mindset, and don't just try to jump into it. I mean, if you're getting involved in male enhancement because you have profound fears, I mean, it's not a substitute for mental health, any kind of mental health needs that you might have, medical or otherwise. So it is a good idea that you learn to approach this kind of training with some kind of objectivity, and that's really how it works best. When you're able to be objective about your training, you're gonna be able to focus on it more. And the more you train that way, this is the good thing about male enhancement training, is it teaches you. It's all about conditioning. All learning is really all about conditioning as well. So, the more you teach yourself to perform a certain way, either physically with the exercises or emotionally with the kind of emotional visualizations that you use with the exercises, the better you're going to get, and you're going to get better in each end. Not just physically, but also conditioning yourself mentally and emotionally. And of course, when it comes to male enhancement training for erection quality, you want to be able to not just perform well physically, but also be able to go into whatever sexual scenario unencumbered mentally and emotionally, being able to look forward to it, as opposed to having to worry about your performance or your size or things like that.
Now that's the thing. When you face a challenge, you have to always, it's true to any aspect of life.
Yes.
You have to focus on the mental side, on the emotional side, and the physical. And they
Yes.
go hand by hand, because we're like physical creatures, but we're very emotional and mental. So
Yes.
a penis pump won't solve all your problems. You
No,
have to go about it in
and
a deeper way.
the thing about this kind of training that's interesting is that you have to approach it in a bit of a different manner. I mean, it's not like, there's some analogies, but it's not quite as direct as, say, something like martial arts or bodybuilding, where, you just pit yourself against the weight of the opponent and try to figure it from there. I mean, the penis is an organ that relies so much on the subconscious that if you try to go into a program and try to just force things to happen, like in a stamina routine, well, you want to force your penis to get hard, it's not going to do that. I mean, it's they talk about the penis having a mind of its own. It's almost very much like that, and you have to, and that's why I mentioned the objectivity with the training, because if you're having those kinds of issues, if you're really concerned about performance anxiety, you have to approach it from another angle. You can't go into your training with a warlike mentality. You have to, be a lot more persuasive. You have to attempt to, first calm yourself and then approach your training with some objectivity. And just to go back to it, I mean, again, if this is if you're in a scenario where you're very mentally anguished over the issue, I mean, it might even do well for you to consider some kind of professional counseling or something before you get into this training, because you really want to try to go into it with a clear mind and with the objective of being committed to your training. And honestly, the way you start your training is how you build a foundation. And you want to make sure that you do that in as a positive an environment as you can create.
AJ, can you tell us about some results that you experienced, like with your clients? Like from point A to point B, how long it took and what was the difference? Like, what do you see?
Well, we conducted a client study. If you go to it's an internet forum, it's called PEGym. It's at PEGYM.com. You do a search for the client study that we conducted. The study went on for several years, and we had some clients who, gained over 2 inches in length. Some of them gained even over 2 inches in girth. Quite a few of them made some very good gains in the realm of EQ and other areas. Some men, they look to specialize in things like trying to change the curvatures and things like that. With this kind of training, the advice that I give to men is you want to try to give a routine that you're on at least 4 weeks to determine its effectiveness. I do recommend taking measurements every couple of weeks. But the first set of measurements, it's you're still kind of figuring things out with the training. Give your session at least 4 weeks to make the assessment, and from there you can determine, well, if you made some kind of measurable progress and you're satisfied with that rate, you can continue. If not, you might need to re-examine something within your routine or your training, or something maybe outside of that, like some kind of physical issue that might be not contributing to your gains there. But we see, it's not unusual for clients to realize, say, half an inch or even an inch in length gains, and we're talking about a few months. Again, the biggest driving factor, and I stress a lot, is EQ. If you look at your male enhancement training as a multifaceted form of training where you're working on certain certain aspects, you're not just trying to target one thing, you're going to make a lot more progress. The workouts that we have set up, in a lot of cases, are structured for that. There's a certain arrangement that the exercises are in that really helps to tie everything together. And you get a lot more out of performing a routine. A good routine in one sitting when the exercises are structured well, as opposed to trying to do one thing one day and then one day, one thing the other day, and hoping for a multi-pronged approach that way.
Yeah, I want to say a word about erection quality.
Okay.
Many guys, when they feel a bit bad about the penis size, they usually go after the size. But what they forget is why they do it from the first place. It's usually for the lady, so she will feel them inside. And it doesn't matter how much big dick you have, if you cannot have a hard erection, or if you cannot last long enough for her to reach an orgasm. So it's much also easier to get a good stamina in bed than getting inches. Plus, if you can get a hard erection and you know what you're doing, I would add to the male enhancement also sex techniques. So in the end, it's all about pleasing the lady. It's not about being in a public place and looking at some other guy's dick and comparing. It's more about the lovemaking, and I think that guys need to remember that. What is the end result? Why they do it for the first place?
Yeah, and there's a lot of different reasons why men get into it. The thing that I like about this training is that it applies to a lot of different areas, and I've had the privilege in the time that I've been involved with this kind of training to know a lot of guys who have performed this kind of training, who've taken it well beyond what they intended to do with it in the first place. And you really learn a lot with it. Some of these guys, when they get into it, they get into it purely for the ego reasons. Mm-hmm. And time passes, and they mature, and then they start to realize that you really have to want to do that. And it's great. You do want to be a good lover. Those things are good. But you also want to make sure that you're doing this for the right reason. You're doing it for yourself. I mean, if you, for example, and this happens a lot. You have a lot of guys who, especially a lot of younger guys who, they may have had some kind of negative experience. Maybe they got into a sexual scenario, or they were insulted by their partner, or something to that effect, or they just have fears off of things they read or things they've seen on movies or whatnot. Mm-hmm. So they go into their training with a mindset of, like a negative mindset, I got to do this so that I can, so then I'll be good enough to be her partner or something like that. And so, and to be honest, when we begin coaching, we always conduct an interview, and you'd be surprised at the number of men who are either average or even above average in size who they have these concerns. And the thing that I found that's really, really great about this kind of training is that once you learn that you can make these changes, and sometimes really profound changes, not just in your size, but in your erection quality, and especially in your confidence and the way you approach things, mm-hmm. You start to see things from a completely different perspective. The things that you used to be afraid of in the past, they no longer affect you in that same manner because you see them from a fresh perspective, and that's, all of the other stuff is great, all of the physical improvements, but I mean, if you can get to a position to where, you're truly confident with yourself, and you acknowledge the accomplishments you've made, and you see them for what they are. That's probably the best result of this kind of training.
Yes, it is a journey, and you
It is.
ended up as a human. So AJ, let's talk about. I'm interested to hear. I see that a lot of things are being sold online, from penis surgeries to big dick pills and penis enlargement devices and stuff like that, ebooks. I would like you to tell me about each one and like pros, cons. Why won't we start with penis surgery?
Okay. Now, these surgeries, they've actually been around for a while. I don't pay very close attention to a lot of the modern surgical techniques, but from what I have seen, there's been some refinement in that area. There are certain scenarios with some men who may have a condition known as micropenis. And these men, I think clinically the term is where, you're talking about a penis that's maybe about an inch or less in length erect, and a lot of that is due to maybe some kind of a congenital defect, some kind of tissue deformation or hormonal issue. I mean, in cases like that, surgery might be a good idea, simply because you need to have something to work with. And if there's a serious tissue problem or a hormonal issue, those kinds of things need to be taken care of before you start this kind of training anyway. So I mean, in cases like that, I could see the need for it. In my opinion, men of average or better size, men who have adequate functioning, it's just my own personal recommendation. I would definitely leave something like a surgery as a last resort. I mean, many of these surgeries that involve severing the ligaments, you should do your research when it comes to these kinds of things, because a lot of the after results are not always positive. Certain things need to be done after the surgery, like weight hanging, which is something you could do even without the surgeries, but they recommend, usually the prescription after lengthening surgery is weight hanging. You have to keep that up for, I believe, 6 weeks was the last recommendation I read for most of these kinds of surgeries. Another issue with the surgery is that you can't do anything sexually for 6 weeks after the surgery. So, while you're resting, you're also causing a decline in EQ, because you're not doing anything. Any kind of regular stimulation that you might have gotten in the past to help you maintain a certain degree of erection quality, now you're not getting it. So, I mean, and of course, there's also the expense factor. Most of these surgeries are very expensive, and you really only have one penis. I mean, you're going to do things to it that may not be reversible, and even in the best case scenarios, I mean, it's not going to leave you with the same quality of functioning as you had before. When they sever that ligament is anchored to the pubic bone. Once they sever it and it's not anchored anymore, your penis is loose. You have to actually guide it in manually. So there's numerous other different kinds of surgeries out there, and we can go into detail with them, but there a lot of times the details are kind of unpleasant. And again, we are talking about usually these kinds of surgeries run into the tens of thousands of dollars. So that would just be my opinion on trying to take a simple approach first, and then working up with the simplest methods, especially the methods that, cost little to no money, and that have proven themselves to be effective.
Mm-hmm. Now, what is the story about big dick pills and male enhancement pills?
Okay. There are a lot of different types of male enhancement supplements. Some of them have been around for a very long time, that have been known to have good effects. For example, there's a herb known as yohimbe. There's a lot of these supplements that contain yohimbe, and yohimbe is very good for helping to induce an erection. In some cases, men have noticed an actual increase in libido when taking this. The drawback with yohimbe is that in certain cases with men who have high blood pressure can cause problems. There's other herbs out there like epimedium, which is known as horny goat weed, and you have maca, and some of those herbs have been shown to work. I will say that if you're going to take any of these supplements, do your homework. Look at the reviews, look at the ingredients, make sure and compare them to the online studies that have been done out there regarding these specific ingredients. And remember that they're supplements. I mean, they're not going to take the place of hard work. If you're looking to get into a male enhancement program, take them with the goal in mind that you're using them to assist your routine and not to do all the work for you. But I do think that if you're going to take these kinds of supplements, you should expect to take them with an exercise program so that you maximize results.
So they're more like a herb-based Viagra, and they don't really make you dig bigger long term.
Well, in a case where you have, let's say you have a gentleman who may have had long-term issues with their erectile functioning. Let's say they've had problems getting erect, their penis has shrunken due to disuse. I think in cases like that, when men start taking these supplements, whether it's the actual effect of the herbs working on the physiology, or even just the placebo effect. I mean, if the man starts getting more regular erections again, starts raising his EQ, I think in scenarios like that you can see growth. I mean, now if you're a healthy man, your penis works fine, you don't have any serious erectile issues. Taking the pills by themselves, I wouldn't expect to see any kind of real growth for them, and that's why I say, if you want to make some serious gains in size, especially, you really should consider taking these pills in conjunction with some kind of a training program.
Now, what about all the gadgets, the penis pumps, extenders, and all those plastic toys that you attach to your penis?
I think if you know how to use them, and if they're quality products, you can get a lot out of them. Now, each different device, it's interesting because they approach things from a different way. For example, the pump relies on vacuum in order to enlarge the penis. It does so in a passive fashion. You have extenders which use tension not only on the base of the penis but also at the head, and kind of separates it from almost from the inside out. It uses very light tension usually, and the objective with that device is to extend the penis over several hours a day, over days and weeks and months. What I do like about extenders is that there's actual scientific backing for them, and there's scientific references in medical databases showing that extenders work. Pumps are curious in that they can be very good for resolving erectile dysfunction issues. I think they could be very good for gaining size if you use them in conjunction with other training, or if you can commit to using pumps long term. What's interesting about pumps is that when I first began with male enhancement, there was very little out there as far as other kinds of training, and most of what you had out there revolved around pumps. And the thing about pumps is that there's you have to use them in a way that most other people wouldn't like. In the beginning, you want to make sure that you're training sensibly, just like you would with all kinds of training. But the thing about pumps is that to get really good size from pumps, you have to use them over quite a period of time, and you have to learn. It's almost like the penis itself has to learn to expand within the pump. The more you use it, the more pliable your tissues get, and some of these advanced pumpers, they can pump themselves temporarily to really huge, enormous sizes. And I think one of the reasons why that hasn't become so popular is that those temporary size gains that these men get, I mean, they make the penis look, like not even like a penis. I mean, it's just so enormous and distorted that it can be off-putting. But that's the thing about it, is that's only temporary. And the objective is, of course, to do that to the point to where, some of that expansion becomes actual growth. And that does happen in cases where you get these men who use it, very strictly over the course of months and even years. You do get that ability. Now, weight hanging. I like weight hanging quite a bit because I think it's one of the more versatile forms of devices. I mean, it's pretty simple to use, but I mean, with weight hanging, you know exactly what you're getting as far as the tension involved.
Can you describe what is weight hanging for people that don't know?
Yes. Weight hanging is when you take a kind of, a device. Usually it's a device that clamps onto the end of the penis, but there are also new devices. You have like the LG hanger that uses a vacuum attachment on the head of the penis, and you hang weights from there. And of course, with the weight hanging, you get precision. You can work with light weights for long duration. You can work up to using heavy weights for short duration. So there's a lot of, what I like about hanging is it gives you a lot of training variety. And it can be, pretty versatile for a device there. So, it's one of the devices that I would recommend if you're going to get into device-based training.
So what we are left with, manual training, penis exercises, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, manual training, I would say, again, in my opinion, that's the preferred method of training because for a few reasons. Number one, it's free. I mean, if you have hands, you can train. It's very versatile. I mean, there hasn't been a device that I've seen created that can duplicate the versatility of the human hand. I mean, you can go from very light tension to extreme tension in virtually no time. The angles of training, you can apply constriction, you can apply tension, you can train at angles. I mean, there's all sorts of things that you can do with the hands. Not only that, but there's also that just the tactile act of performing the exercise. The degree of focus that it takes to make sure that you're performing the exercise correctly, make sure that you're getting the proper degree of tissue stretch, which that again falls into the category of EQ improvement. You should be inducing a tissue stretch, a deep tissue stretch each time you train, if you want to see those gains. It's very hard to duplicate that with just the efficiency of being able to do that with the devices there. So. Manual training, that's a subject I can talk about all day, and it's I would say that the disadvantages to manual training is I guess a lack of precision in the amount of tension you're using. But I think you can make up for that by taking things a little more slowly and just by really focusing on the quality of the exercise as opposed to just getting caught up in the number of reps that you're doing or seeing how hard you pull. And this kind of training really also it's not conducive to extremes. Like there's some forms of training out there where the harder you push yourself, the better results you get. Manual enhancement training, it's not like that. It's not like powerlifting or bodybuilding. I mean, if you had to compare it more to a form of training, I would compare it more to something like yoga. Where the objective is, just to, you want to strengthen those tissues because, the harder you can train, the better you recover, the more blood flow you have, but you want to balance out that tissue strengthening with flexibility. That way you're getting the best of both results. You're getting a fitter penis, stronger penis, one that can, stand up to a lot more advanced training, which translates to more growth. And at the same time, give it the flexibility that it needs to make those gains.
Now, AJ, if somebody that is new to male enhancement, but is serious about it, wants to start, where do you recommend them to start? Like, what would be the beginning point? Because there's so many things you can do. So many techniques, so many ways, so many gadgets and toys. And where should one start?
Okay. Well, there's a lot of educational resources. I mean, before anything, you really really should educate yourself on the subject. You shouldn't get into this kind of training and think that, if you don't know anything about it, you're just going to jump into it, immediately after reading something. I mean, this is something that it can be a life-changing kind of training. So, I mean, it should be taken seriously, and it should be researched thoroughly. Not just because of the commitment factor, but you don't want to hurt yourself with this kind of training. And if you don't know what you're doing, you can hurt yourself. And that, even with manual training, where you may not even be using a lot of force. I mean, if there's some kind of pre-existing condition, or there's something that you misunderstand with the training, you might look at certain exercises and think, well, I could do 100 or 1,000 of these and make 10 times the gains, and actually end up hurting yourself really badly. So it's really, really important that you do your best to educate yourself before you get started with this kind of training. I really like the site that you're setting up, the Vibrating Love site. It's, I think, someone visiting your site can certainly get started with what they need to know for that kind of training. So, I mean, your sites like yours are excellent. The PEGym.com forum is, tons of information there. The first thing you want to do before you even begin training is determine your objectives. What is it that you're looking to get out of this kind of training? And it could, of course, it could be more than one thing, but there are certain priorities. Of course, like before, like I mentioned before, you want to make sure first that your mind is in the right place when you get into this kind of training. Make sure that you're, you can approach your training in a mature and patient manner. Even if your erection quality is good, you should plan to look to increasing it while you're training. That's not something that you can expect to stay static. As your penis gets larger, you're going to be able to, you're going to have to, at a minimum, make proportionate amount of gains in your ability to supply blood, to maintain blood flow as your penis gets bigger. If not, there's going to be a decline. So you want to make sure that you've got that taken care of too. And then we get into the advanced part of male enhancement, which is we talk about size, we talk about maybe extreme stamina, we can talk about improving the shape of the penis, curvatures, maybe focusing on the size of the glands, and so. But again, those are things that you do in steps. But you really want to make sure that you, when you get into training, determine what it is you want to do. Expect to spend the first few weeks to few months conditioning. Learning the exercise, getting a feel for the exercise. You want to be able to develop, such great form that you can take take that form, and then, then that's when you start adding more repetitions and more intensity and whatnot, because you built upon that proper foundation of training.
It's much like going to the gym. You don't want to go first day at the gym and lift your own weight, because that's how you get hurt. So I even had a trainer once. He said in Soviet Russia, you have the bench press, for the chest. So he said, we give new guys a broomstick without weights, from wood, until they do it perfectly, the technique. Only then you begin to add weights.
Exactly.
So if you want to play it safe and get the results and guarantee the results, so it's better to start slow, without a doubt.
Yes. I like that analogy a lot, especially when it comes to weight training. I mean, there are some differences with the form of training, but there's a lot of similarities. And I remember reading once how studies have said that when you first get into weight training, some of the fastest gains that you make are not even due to any changes in the muscles themselves, or they're more neurological changes. And I think the same thing kind of applies with male enhancement training, where really focusing on the feel of the exercise and making sure you're getting an adequate tissue, really deep tissue stretch each time you're performing the exercise. If you're focusing on a length exercise, you really want to feel the ligaments at the base stretching. And then as the exercise continues, then you'll actually feel the rest of the penis, from the shaft on almost. When you're doing girth work, you want to feel the tunica and the fascia of the penis expanding over time. As you perform the exercise, you should actually, from the beginning of the exercise to the end, you should notice more engorgement. When you're performing the Kegel exercise, the erect Kegel is probably one of the best exercises for really, seeing the tissue expansion at work. I mean, you're performing that exercise with a 100% erection, and by Kegling, you're hyper expanding the penis, so you're seeing it expand above and beyond its normal dimensions, and that right there is probably the epitome of tissue stretch. If you can really focus on the sensations you're getting from that exercise and try to apply it to some of the others, you're going to really do well in establishing the really good form of that exercise. And then usually when you finish off male enhancement routine, there's other stamina work. Sometimes we do edging. That's a very popular one, and that has to do with making sure that you're maintaining a full erection throughout the exercise. Normally, that exercise it ends in ejaculation, but during that exercise, what you're attempting to do is get to a certain minimum standard of time, and during that exercise, also maintain a minimum standard of hardness. And later on, the more advanced aspects of that exercise involve being able to have more control over when you ejaculate. And of course, probably the most important aspect of those kinds of exercises are visualization. And now, when I refer to visualization in this sense, it's not erotic fantasies and picturing things like that in your head. It's actually what you're doing is you are attempting to emotionally project the kinds of feelings that you hope to experience in a sexual encounter. And by that I mean you want to be unencumbered by any anxiety. You want to feel confident. If you've ever been in a sexual scenario where everything's going right and you're not worried about anything, you're just enjoying the experience, you want to attempt to duplicate that during the exercises. That way it creates that conditioning effect.
Exactly.
And you're attempting to do that to the point to where that becomes your default. And that's and you can see how properly developed you can take that bit of education and apply it to other areas of your life and do really good things.
So we said start with educating yourself, then set a priority to what you want to achieve. You want to last longer in bed, you want a bigger penis, you want to cure your erectile dysfunction. Some guys, it may even be, I have to quit porn before I can restore my erection, before I can restore my sexual attraction to women that I date. And then starting slowly with conditioning, which is important.
It takes work, but it can be done, and you have to see it as a process of conditioning. You have to allow for the occasional setback. We're all human, but the goal should be to, over time, continue to move forward. Continue taking your progress, and even if you have your little setbacks, just you don't let that destroy the progress you've made, and you just continue on and acknowledge that in time, with conditioning and with hard work, you will achieve your goals.
Yeah, and it comes back to defining the priorities in the beginning.
Oh yes. Yeah, I when it comes to things like that, when I interview clients for my consultations and I ask certain questions, if someone is going through things like that, that honestly should take priority over other things. It's going to be difficult for you to focus on the more cosmetic aspects of male enhancement, just getting size or something like that, when you have serious emotional hindrances that prevent you from having a satisfactory sex life. All of those other things, it's difficult to focus on that when you have bigger issues.
Yeah, it's like if you want to walk a long path, it's better to cut off the weights that stop you first. Before you start walking and working on enlargement and stuff like that.
I can agree with that.
AJ, it's been a wonderful webinar, but tell me, if somebody wants to contact you for questions or help, how can he reach you?
Okay. Well, I have a service, consultation service at maleenhancementcoach.com. I can always be reached through there without fail. I assist with a program with the form at pegym.com. Usually there just about every day. I go by the nickname Big Al on that forum, and I've been there for a number of years. It's a great forum. And also, of course, they can contact me with your permission through your site. I'd definitely be honored if we can make arrangements through there.
Yeah,
That would be
sure.
great.
Just send me an email through Vibrating Love. Tell me you want to contact AJ, and I will give you the contacts.
Thank you so much.
So AJ, I want to thank you for this webinar. It's been very insightful. I've learned a lot about what is male enhancement, about the solutions, and I think that now everybody who watched it know how to start and where to start from.
I appreciate you having me on. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
And until next time.
Thank you.